Ryan used to whisper my name like a promise. In the soft blush of morning, he'd lean in and brush a kiss across my cheek, murmuring, "Grace," as though I were the only thing anchoring his soul to this world. His voice warm, slow, full of devotion, wrapped around me like sunlight slipping through the window blinds. It was a sound I trusted, a cadence I clung to, in both good days and bad. For years I let that voice quiet my doubts, lull me into peace. But not tonight. Tonight my name sliced through the silence like a blade, not a whisper of love, a whisper laced with calculation. I woke with a jolt in the middle of the night. The bed beside me, usually warm and cocooned in shared dreams, was cold and empty. I reached out instinctively, fingers brushing nothing but rumpled sheets. My first thought was innocent. Maybe he was in the bathroom or downstairs grabbing a glass of water. But just as I turned over to fall back asleep, I heard it. A low voice, a whisper, intentional. It drifted from down the hall like smoke, soft but distinct. My heart began to pound. I sat up, every nerve alive. It was Ryan's voice. Calm, controlled. Not the way he sounded when he was talking to me, but how he spoke on business calls, measured, calculated, rehearsed. Then came the words that froze my blood. "She still suspects nothing." I couldn't breathe. It was as if invisible hands were clutching my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. The loose threads of unease I'd been ignoring for months began to tighten. The way he locked his phone the moment I entered the room. The vague explanations for staying late at the office. The occasional unexplained withdrawals from our joint account. I had chalked them up to stress, to work, to anything but betrayal. But now those excuses rang hollow. With trembling hands, I swung my legs out of bed. The cold hardwood kissed my bare feet like a warning. I moved slowly, each step a battle between dread and curiosity. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel of secrets. A faint light spilled from beneath the door to Ryan's home office. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath, listening. "I've already moved the funds," he said. "Everything's almost in place." The words landed like thunder in my ears. Moved what in place for what? My pulse roared like war drums in my chest, so loud I was sure he'd hear it. Then came the sound of footsteps, his footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me. I tiptoed back to the bedroom, slipped under the covers, just as the door creaked open. My body lay still, breathing measured, every muscle clenched in dread. Ryan slipped back into bed beside me, with the ease of a man who had nothing to hide. But I knew better now. His steady breath mocked the storm raging inside me. There was something he was keeping from me, something dark, and it had everything to do with me. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, like nothing had changed. Birds chirped outside, the coffee maker clicked on automatically, and Ryan lay beside me, breathing in that same rhythmic calm. But everything was different, because now I knew. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a hurricane of thoughts. What had he meant? She still suspects nothing. Everything's almost in place. Those words echoed in my skull like a cruel riddle I couldn't solve. Ryan wasn't just hiding something, he was orchestrating something. Something big, and I was clearly the target. When his breathing shifted and he rolled onto his side, I seized the moment. Quiet as snowfall, I slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. For years, I hadn't paid much attention to our finances. That had always been Ryan's domain. He handled the bills, the investments, the accounts. I had trusted him completely. But this morning, that trust felt like a trap. I opened our banking app. My thumb hovered over the login button, reluctant but resolute. Within seconds, I was inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Withdrawal after withdrawal, $500 here, $1 is $200 there, another $2,000, all within the past 3 months. It wasn't just the amounts, it was the pattern. Regular, deliberate, hidden in plain sight. This wasn't paying bills. This wasn't investing. This was something else entirely. I stared at the numbers, each one a betrayal etched in digital ink. My stomach twisted as I tried to make sense of it. What was he doing with this money? Where was it going? My breath caught as a soft voice cut through the silence behind me. Checking our accounts this early, I spun around. Ryan stood in the doorway, tousled hair, pajama bottoms, and a sleepy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He rubbed the back of his neck like he always did when trying to act casual. But there was a flicker, a flash of tension in his gaze as he spotted the phone in my hand. "Just a random check," I said, forcing a smile. My voice came out thinner than I expected. Some of the transactions didn't look familiar. He strolled into the kitchen the way someone would if they rehearsed every movement. Poured himself a cup of coffee. Sipped. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Oh, those," he said lightly. "A few small investments. Sorry, I meant to tell you." His words were smooth, but I saw the crack in the mask. The way he avoided eye contact. The way his smile wobbled slightly at the edges. I'd known Ryan for nearly a decade. I knew when he was lying. And this was a lie. But I didn't challenge him. Not yet. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe him, pretending to still be the woman who didn't question. But inside, a quiet, cold certainty began to settle. Something was terribly wrong, and the man in front of me, the man I had shared a home and a life with, was no longer someone I could trust. That night, I watched him closely. He was on his phone, constantly tapping out messages, then flipping the screen down every time I walked by. He was secretive, distracted, and oddly calm, as if the storm he was bracing for wasn't his own but mine. He stepped outside to take a call, whispering into the phone, with a tone that sounded urgent and calculating. My heart thumped wildly as I pressed my ear to the door. I couldn't make out much, but I didn't need to. I already knew. He was hiding something, and whatever it was getting closer to the surface. Then came the moment that changed everything. After dinner, Ryan stood up, stretched, and said he was going to take a shower. A normal enough routine except for one small detail. He left his phone on the table, unlocked, unattended. He had never done that before. I froze, blood pounding in my ears. The bathroom door clicked shut. Water started running. I had seconds, maybe minutes. My fingers hovered over the device, heart hammering so loudly, I feared it would give me away. I picked it up. The screen lit up with a new message. My breath caught in my throat, from Daniel Voss. "Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there." I stood still, the weight of the phone heavier than it should have been. My mind reeled. Daniel Voss. A name I didn't know, a message I couldn't ignore. What was almost there, and why did it feel like my entire life was about to be stolen out from under me? I gently placed the phone back, exactly where he left it. My fingers trembled as I backed away. The sound of the shower was still running, masking the sound of my racing heart. Ryan wasn't just hiding something, he was planning something, and he was almost done. That night, I lay beside Ryan in the dark, staring at the ceiling. His breath came steady and slow, the rhythm of a man at peace, or at least pretending to be. I listened to the sound of the shower drain, gurgling hours earlier, the faint click of the bathroom door, the hollow weight of the name Daniel Voss echoing in my mind. There was no doubt now. He wasn't just hiding something, he was building something quietly, methodically, dangerously, and I was the pawn in his game. But I wasn't going to let myself be played. The next morning, I waited until Ryan had left for work, another conveniently vague strategy meeting with his business partner, which now sounded more like code for backdoor deals. As soon as the door closed behind him, I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't dialed in years for anything serious. Sophie Lane. We met in college back when we both wore second-hand denim and ran on coffee ambition and late-night arguments about whether justice was a myth. Sophie became a lawyer, a brilliant one, the kind of person who never flinched in a courtroom or in the face of betrayal. I didn't even wait for the ringtone to finish before she picked up. "Grace." Her voice was alert, cautious. "I need help," I whispered. Within the hour, I was at her office. Her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, but I couldn't appreciate the view. I could barely sit still. My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I told her everything Ryan's late-night whispers, the suspicious withdrawals, the text message from Daniel Voss. Sophie listened in silence, her expression unreadable but focused. Her hands were still, her posture razor straight. She didn't interrupt once, not even to take notes. When I finally paused, breathless and shaking, she leaned forward, fingers laced together, like a verdict ready to fall. "You need to move everything," she said. "Today." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean your assets, the apartment, your investments, your savings. Anything that's solely yours, we need to shield them now. Ryan's planning something. If we don't act first, he'll drain you before you know it." I stared at her, the weight of her words crashing down like a cold wave. I'd spent so long pretending the cracks weren't real, pretending that Ryan still loved me, pretending that this was a marriage, not a setup, but pretending wouldn't save me now. "We can use a trust." Sophie continued, already unlocking her laptop. "Quiet, legal, bulletproof. We'll transfer everything under it in your name. If he tries to come after you, he'll be blocked at every turn." A swell of panic rose in my chest, but it was laced with something else, resolve. I nodded, swallowing the fear. "Do it," I said. The next 72 hours were a blur of paperwork, notarized signatures, hidden calls, and encrypted emails. Sophie worked like a machine, efficient, tactical, relentless. She knew exactly how to move under the radar, keeping everything hush-hush. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my own body, like I was playing a role in a movie where the woman finally wakes up and realizes she's not crazy, she's just been lied to. By the third night, everything was locked. The apartment, the accounts, my private retirement portfolio, even the old brokerage account I'd forgotten about, was sealed under the trust's name. It was all mine, legally mine, and beyond Ryan's reach. I slept that night for the first time in weeks without waking in panic. But the illusion didn't last. A few mornings later, Ryan came home early from work. He set down his keys, poured himself a cup of coffee, and joined me at the kitchen table as if everything was normal. But something in the air had shifted thicker, heavier. He placed a folder in front of me and smiled. "I've been thinking," he said, casually flipping the folder open. "It's time we revisited our finances. You know, just to simplify things. Combine accounts, merge assets, make it easier in case anything ever happens." I stared at the papers without touching them. "And what would that accomplish?" I asked evenly. He shrugged. "Just protection, efficiency. You never know what life's going to throw at us." I looked up, slowly locking eyes with him. The smile on his face was rehearsed, almost lazy. But behind it, behind the calm tone and carefully chosen words, was a predator's focus. He was trying to box me in to wrap a bow around whatever he thought he had already stolen. I forced a smile. "That sounds smart. Could I review the paperwork first?" A flicker of surprise danced across his face, but he recovered quickly. "Of course," he said, sliding the folder closer. "Take your time. I'll get the updated drafts ready next week." I nodded, sipping my coffee, as if I hadn't just spent 3 days locking him out of everything. Ryan thought he was setting the trap, but I was already 3 moves ahead. I had thought betrayal was a private act. Whispers in the dark, hidden bank transactions, messages from unfamiliar names. But nothing prepares you for the moment betrayal steps out of the shadows and into the spotlight. It started as a whisper at work. I noticed it on a Monday. The usual warmth in the office felt off. Colleagues glanced sideways when I passed. Conversations halted just a little too quickly as I entered the break room. The smiles were thinner, stretched over something uncomfortable. For a moment I thought I was imagining it, just nerves and sleepless nights catching up with me. But by Tuesday, the tension was undeniable. Then Rachel, my assistant, walked into my office with a face that looked carved from worry. "There's something you need to see," she said, closing the door behind her. She handed me a printed screenshot. It was a post on an anonymous corporate gossip forum. A faceless user had made a bold, inflammatory claim. "A certain female finance exec here has been embezzling funds from her own company, funneling money into secret accounts during her divorce. Want to bet she blames her husband next, My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. The comment section filled in the blanks. Sounds like Grace Carter to me. That explains her recent stress. She always looked like she had something to hide. My heart dropped into my stomach. I felt physically sick. Who posted this? I whispered. Rachel's voice was tight. We can't prove it, but come on. Who else, Ryan? This wasn't just a financial ambush anymore. He was attacking my credibility, my career, my name. I stood up, the air suddenly thin in the room. If this spreads, it could destroy me. Rachel didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The fear in her eyes was enough. I left the office early, the screenshot burning a hole in my bag like a ticking bomb. My reputation, my professional life that I'd built with late nights and relentless grit was now dangling by a thread. That evening, I sat across from Sophie in her office, trying to explain what had just happened without breaking apart completely. She listened, her face cold with fury, her hands clenched on the armrests of her chair. He's weaponizing public perception. It's calculated. He wants to shame you into silence. He's trying to break me, I said quietly. No, Sophie replied, her voice sharp as glass. He's trying to make you panic, because you've already won the first round and he knows it. I sat back trembling. So, what do we do now? Her expression hardened. We fight back, not with anger, with law. She laid it out like a general prepping for war. Step 1, a cease and desist letter for defamation. Step 2, if it happened again, we'd file for intentional infliction of emotional distress and character assassination. Step 3, prepare evidence to demonstrate his smear campaign. But it wasn't just legal, it was personal. I wasn't just protecting my bank account anymore, I was protecting who I was. The next few days were suffocating. I checked my phone, constantly jumped at every notification, braced for more slander. I felt watched, hunted. It was as though Ryan had reached into my lungs and stolen the air. Then came the final blow. Late Friday afternoon, Sophie called me again. Grace, she said carefully, I need you to come in. The tone in her voice made my skin crawl. When I arrived, she slid a thick manila folder across the table. Ryan's filed a financial misconduct claim against you, accusing you of stealing from your joint accounts before the trust was created. I stared at her, heart racing. That's absurd. He was the one moving money. I know, she said, but he's claiming he has proof. I flipped open the folder. Inside were a series of fake bank statements, doctored images showing transactions I never authorized, timestamps that didn't match the actual trust dates accounts I'd never seen in my life. And then I saw the signature at the bottom of the affidavit. Daniel Voss, Ryan's silent partner. My vision blurred. My fingers trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. Sophie leaned in, her voice low and even. He's going all in. He's using Voss as a co-claimant to accuse you of fraud. If we don't act fast, this could spiral into a criminal investigation. I couldn't speak. For a long time, I just stared at the papers, watching my name dragged through the mud in cold black ink. Finally, I whispered, "Can we prove they're fake?" Her eyes gleamed. "Not only can we prove it, we're going to bury them with it." The man who once whispered, "I love you," into my ear now signed legal papers, accusing me of criminal fraud. The contrast was almost poetic if it hadn't been so cruel. Sophie and I spent the next several days locked in her office, poring over spreadsheets, timestamps, emails, and metadata like forensic scientists dissecting a crime scene. She had already brought in a financial forensics expert, a calm, grey-haired woman named Evelyn, who analyzed data with the kind of precision you'd expect from a NASA engineer. "What you're dealing with, Evelyn," said, sliding a printout across the conference table, "is a classic forgery error. These transactions Ryan submitted, they're dated 2 months before the account they claim came from was even opened." I blinked. "You're saying they didn't even bother to fake the setup timeline?" "They got lazy," she said with the faintest hint of satisfaction. "Overconfidence tends to do that." Sophie smirked, already scanning her notes. "Perfect. That's our bullet." And just like that, the dread that had clung to my skin like fog began to lift slowly but steadily. We weren't just defending anymore. We had something that could dismantle Ryan's entire campaign. 3 days later, Sophie filed the counter-lawsuit, civil defamation, intentional use of falsified documents, attempted financial sabotage, emotional distress. The paperwork was elegant, brutal, and razor-sharp. The courtroom date came fast, too fast. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. I sat on the edge of my bed in silence, staring out the window at the city lights, wondering how I got here. Wondering how I ever loved someone who had the capacity to lie so deeply, so cleanly. By morning, I pulled on a navy blue blazer, pinned my hair into something that looked stronger than I felt, and walked into the courthouse like it was a battlefield. Not with fear, with focus. Inside the courtroom buzzed with the low hum of tension. Ryan sat across the room in a tailored charcoal suit, flipping through a legal pad, like he was reviewing stock numbers. Daniel Voss sat beside him, his face unreadable. I didn't need to look long to feel the simmering smugness coming off them. Let them feel confident. That was about to change. The judge entered and everything stilled. The proceedings began slowly reading motions, presenting initial claims. Ryan's lawyer droned on with statements that felt rehearsed and devoid of substance. But then Sophie rose and the room changed. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "we will be proving that the documents submitted by Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Voss are not only falsified, but temporally impossible. The accounts they refer to were not even in existence on the dates they claim fraudulent activity occurred." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You have evidence, we do. A full forensic analysis from an independent expert." And she walked to the evidence table and held up a document, the original bank statement with the account creation date. The courtroom shifted. I could feel Ryan stiffen across from me, like someone finally realizing the floor beneath them was about to give way. The judge scanned the pages handed to him, his brow furrowed. "This appears to be damning." Sophie's voice remained cool. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we'd like to submit proof that Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Voss have a documented history of financial manipulation. Mr. Voss, in particular, has been previously investigated for falsifying records in unrelated civil cases." Ryan's attorney leapt to his feet. "Objection. Irrelevant history," sustained the judge, cut him off, but not before eyeing Ryan with new suspicion. Then the judge turned to Ryan. "Mr. Reynolds, do you have any explanation for the chronological discrepancy?" Ryan opened his mouth, but for the first time in the entire ordeal, he hesitated. I believe it's a misunderstanding," he stammered. "The paperwork must have gotten mixed up." We were under the impression the judge's voice was flat. "That's not how bank records work." A low murmur rippled through the room. Ryan's jaw clenched. Daniel Voss stared straight ahead, his confidence dissolving like sand in rain. The judge turned back to Sophie. "You may proceed with the defamation countersuit," he said. "The burden of proof has shifted." Sophie gave a curt nod. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. We weren't just surviving this anymore, we were winning. By the time the hearing concluded, Ryan was pale, rattled, and visibly shaken. As the courtroom emptied, he tried to make eye contact with me, but I didn't flinch. I walked past him, silent, steady, a fortress built from every moment he underestimated me. Outside, Sophie stepped into the sunlight, smiling, as she handed me a copy of the court order. "For the record," she said, "you were magnificent." I didn't feel magnificent, I felt tired. But for the first time in a long while, I also felt safe. And I knew we weren't done yet. They say karma doesn't need an invitation, it shows up exactly when it's ready. For Ryan Carter that day came swiftly, and it hit like a wrecking ball, cloaked in legal jargon and public humiliation. 3 days after the court exposed his fraudulent documents, his carefully curated life began to unravel. Word spread faster than wildfire, first through the firm, then the industry, and finally into the kind of professional circles where reputation isn't just a badge, it's currency. By the end of the week, Ryan was summoned to a closed-door meeting with the board of directors at his firm. He didn't come back. I didn't need a formal announcement to know what happened. His name disappeared from the leadership roster on the company's website. The usual Monday morning emails stopped bearing his signature. His corner office, once the symbol of his inflated ego, stood empty blinds, drawn desk cleared, as if he'd never existed. Later, I heard from a former colleague he'd been let go, quietly escorted out with a sealed agreement and a security guard watching his every step. The man who once prided himself on closing six-figure deals now couldn't close a door behind him without it locking permanently. Then came the financial dominoes. He sold his beloved vintage Porsche, the same car he used to brag about polishing every Sunday morning with a microfiber cloth and a Negroni in hand. I watched the listing go up online, the price slashed week after week like a sinking stock. The luxurious penthouse apartment he once insisted was an investment in lifestyle went next. Listed, reduced, eventually foreclosed. Meanwhile, I sat in the apartment I had protected with every ounce of foresight and fear. Safe, secure, mine. One evening, a thick envelope arrived at my door. Ryan's attorney had sent a final plea, a proposed settlement, half the money he had once demanded, a request to drop the defamation countersuit, a quiet end. It reeked of desperation. Sophie read through it, lips curling slightly with each page. "He knows he's done," she said. "This is him trying to crawl out of the mess he created with the last shred of dignity he has left." I shook my head. "He doesn't deserve quiet. We rejected the offer." 2 weeks later, the lawsuit advanced. Sophie filed an official claim for damages for the lies, for the fake documents, for the attempt to destroy everything I had worked to build. Our case was strong, our evidence bulletproof, and our resolve unshakable. As for Daniel Voss, he disappeared like the coward he was, vanishing into legal limbo, unreachable and irrelevant. His name now permanently attached to falsification charges under review. But Ryan remained in the spotlight, except now it was the kind of attention no one wants. His name appeared in finance forums, not as a leader, but as a cautionary tale. A story told in boardrooms as a warning, don't be a Ryan Carter. I watched his fall from a distance, not with glee, but with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had survived the fire and stepped out the other side without the smell of smoke on her skin. One night I sat alone on my balcony, the city lights twinkling like confetti thrown in slow motion. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from Sophie. "He's officially bankrupt. The court awarded you damages. It's done." I let the words sink in, not because I didn't believe them, but because part of me had held my breath for so long I'd forgotten what release felt like. Ryan Carter had lost everything, and I hadn't lost myself. I still remember the moment clearly, sitting there with a glass of wine, the wind brushing my hair, like a friend saying you made it. I looked out at the skyline, the city humming with life, and whispered 2 words to no one in particular. Thank you. Not to Ryan, not to fate, but to the part of me that had refused to break. The woman who had sat across from a liar in her kitchen and smiled like she didn't already know. The woman who waited, planned, fought, and won. I didn't just escape his trap. I dismantled it piece by piece until he was the one left standing alone in the dark. Freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives softly, like the quiet clink of a wine glass against another, like laughter, echoing through candlelight, like the absence of fear in a room once haunted by it. 1 week after the final ruling, Sophie insisted we celebrate. Not just the court victory, not just the damages, but the reclaiming of something much harder to quantify: myself. She reserved a table at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Chicago skyline, the kind of place Ryan always dismissed as too sentimental, as if sentiment were a weakness. That night, I wore a sleek black dress I hadn't touched in years, the one he once said was a little too bold. I wore it anyway. When I arrived, the air was crisp with early autumn, the city glowing beneath us like a slow-burning constellation. Sophie stood to greet me, her eyes dancing with pride. Emily was there too, my oldest friend from college, and a few others who had stood by me when the walls felt like they were closing in. As I took my seat, a round of applause burst out from the table. Not loud, just enough. "To Grace," Sophie said, raising her glass, "who reminded us all what it looks like when a woman fights with strategy, not fury, and wins with grace." I clinked glasses with them, the wine cool and rich on my tongue. For a moment, I just let it linger. Victory didn't taste like vengeance. It tasted like clarity. Throughout dinner, we laughed. We remembered things I had forgotten, the early signs. I brushed aside the nights I cried in silence, the ridiculous moments of levity that got me through. I told them everything I hadn't said out loud before. The fear, the numbness, the way my heart used to jump at the sound of Ryan's footsteps, even before I understood why. And they listened, not as spectators, but as witnesses. "Do you feel different?" Emily asked gently, her hand resting lightly on mine. I nodded. Lighter, like I set down a weight I didn't know I was carrying. She smiled. "And what's next?" I let the question settle. Not revenge, not rebuilding from spite, but reinvention on my own terms. "I don't want to live cautiously anymore," I said. "I want to live deliberately. I want to wake up and feel proud of the person I see in the mirror, not because I survived, but because I chose better." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then here's to choosing better." Another round of glasses raised, another ripple of warmth through my chest, not from the wine, but from the company. After dinner, I lingered on the rooftop alone for a while. The city pulsed below, alive and full of stories I didn't know, wouldn't ever know. But mine, my story, was finally mine again. I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked the long way home. Past the familiar cafe where I used to meet Ryan. Past the bookstore I used to duck into to escape his moods. Past the street where I once stood in the rain, wondering if I was going crazy for suspecting the man I loved. Now I walked that same street, not as a woman betrayed, but as a woman reborn. My apartment was quiet when I returned. No arguments, no secrets whispered behind closed doors. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the softness of the couch, and the clean scent of lavender from a candle flickering on the shelf. I curled up with a book, but found myself staring out the window again at the skyline, at the space between what was and what's to come. My phone buzzed on the table. A number I didn't recognize. I didn't hesitate. Blocked. I didn't need to know if it was Ryan or one of his cronies, or just the echo of a past life trying to claw its way back in. No more. That night I slept with the windows open. The wind carried the sound of the city, a lullaby, a reminder that life moves on. And this time it was moving with me, not against me. Some battles don't leave scars you can see. They leave quieter wounds buried deep in trust and memory, in the space between who you were and who you had to become. It's been several months since the courtroom doors closed behind me and Ryan Carter became a footnote instead of a threat. His name still surfaces now and then, mentioned in bitter whispers, at corporate mixers, or used as a cautionary tale in industry articles titled "When Greed Backfires." But for me, he no longer stirs panic, just clarity. I've had time to reflect, not just on what he did, but on what I allowed for too long. And that's not about blaming myself, it's about reclaiming responsibility. Because real love doesn't require blindness, and trust doesn't mean handing over the keys to your future without a map. Ryan never understood that. To him, love was leverage. Trust was a strategy. Vulnerability was an opening to exploit. But I learned something he never did. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can love deeply and still protect yourself. You can be betrayed and still refuse to become bitter. Ryan taught me that monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear wedding rings and say, "I love you," like a lullaby, until the day you realize it was always a distraction. But more importantly, the people around me, Sophie, Emily, even Rachel at work, taught me something else. That strength isn't just standing your ground in court, it's getting up the next day and choosing joy over vengeance. It's laughing again, even when the echo reminds you of a time you cried in the same room. It's trusting again, not blindly but wisely with your eyes wide open. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it wouldn't be to leave Ryan earlier. It wouldn't even be to check the bank accounts or read the signs faster. I would say this: you are not naive for loving. You are not foolish for trusting. You are human. And when the time comes, you'll know how to fight. You'll know how to rise. The victory wasn't in the legal fees I forced him to pay, or the apartment he tried and failed to take. The real win was the way I walk into rooms now, head held high, shoulders unburdened, eyes clear. I don't live my life waiting for the next betrayal. I live it with the wisdom of what I've survived and the fire of someone who refuses to be reduced to what she endured. As for Ryan, I sometimes wonder if he learned anything from it all. If he looks at his life, the lost career, the empty apartment, the broken partnerships, and feels even a shred of regret. But I suspect he doesn't. Because men like Ryan don't learn. They blame. And that I've come to realize is his prison. Mine was temporary. His is permanent. Because while I rebuilt, he rewrote lies. While I grew, he deflected. While I learned to trust myself again, he doubled down on deceit. In the end, I walked away with more than I ever thought I would. Not just freedom, but power. Not just survival, but a new beginning. So if you're out there sitting in silence, doubting your instincts, blaming yourself for trusting the wrong person, I want you to hear this: you are not weak for believing in someone. You are strong for choosing to believe in yourself again. And one day when the dust settles and your voice comes back, you'll look at the life you've rebuilt and realize they never broke you. They just introduced you to the strongest version of who you could become.